All right, thank you all for coming back to our discussion on the Diamond Sutra. In case you forgot, the text is Daehaeng Sunim's translation of the Diamond Sutra, and the title is the Diamond Sutra, The Great Unfolding. And if you're not familiar with Korean, the term Sun Master is the same as Zen Master, but actually the more familiar term is Kun Sunim, or just Senior Sunim, or sometimes Great Sunim. And so usually in Korea, people refer to her as Daehaeng Sunim. And so that's what I'll be using most of the time here. And we left off on chapter 10, page 103. And the title of this is chapter 10, This Non-Dual Mind, which is everything working together as one. And one of the things about these chapters that I really like is that just the chapter title by itself is this real true nugget. It's like a wadu, or it's like just a little bite of the truth itself. And so even if you didn't know the rest of the chapter, even if you didn't read the rest of it, just this one part is quite a bit to be working with. If you just reflected on that, this non-dual mind, which is everything working together as one, right just in that, there's a lot of really profound meaning. But, all right, let me go ahead and start with page 105. And I'll go ahead and read this verse, the first verse. The Buddha asked the Buddhi, in the beginning, in becoming aware of this great whole that is the entire universe working as one, where there is no yesterday or today, do you think that I have attained something? No, world-honored one. When you experience this great seat of wisdom, one mind, this bright light of all minds functioning together as one, this functioning together was, in the truest sense, not something you gained. And this is a really interesting statement, because the Buddha is basically saying, when I awaken to everything working as one, I didn't gain anything, right? Which is not the normal way we think of things, right? Even in English, if somebody's trying to explain something to me, I may say, okay, I get it. I get it. I have an understanding that I didn't have before. But here the Buddha is making a really clear point of saying there was nothing added on, right? Everything was exactly the way it was before as it was after. Nothing was any different. It's just, maybe it can be described as subjective versus relative. Subjectively, your perspective has changed, but relatively, nothing else has changed. I'm not sure this is the best example, but if you think about it, all of the technology, all of everything we have today is exactly the same stuff that was here on Earth 2,000 years ago, right? Nothing's been added, right? It's the same planet, it's the same, mostly, wildlife, people are basically the same. Every single thing, the potential for smartphones was 100% there 2,000 years ago, right? For steel and all this other stuff. Nothing's changed. But obviously, things are different now. But so the Buddha wanted to make this point that there's nothing added, because it gets really easy to think, I've gained something. I have something that wasn't there before. And I'm not sure he meant this for Subhuti, but the mistake that people think is, I'm practicing hard, I have my spiritual path, and unconsciously people think, or maybe even consciously, I'm trying to gain something. I'm trying to add something I didn't have before. And in that, you can lose a lot of time, right? If you're really sincere, at some point, you'll get past that. But you can spend a lot of time, it's like you're looking in the wrong direction, right? I keep staring at this door, waiting for something to come through the door. And meanwhile, it's right behind me, and it's always been right behind me. But as long as I keep looking this way, I'm missing it. And so it's this idea that we have to gain something. The flip side of gaining something is deficiency, right? Something's lacking. Something's insufficient or deficient in me that I have to fix, right? Like there's a missing part, there's a missing substance or a missing quality. And if everything is a non-dual whole, then there's nothing excluded. There's nothing missing. Everything's already right there. And so we talk about this in terms of spiritual practice, but one of the things we do in spiritual practice is, in English terms, we take what's arising from within us and from without us, entrust that to what we call our foundation, or maybe true self or divine spark, whatever, and then let that melt down, let that dissolve. And as that dissolves, it's as if it's getting aligned with the whole, right? It's as if it's changing shape and flowing in tune with the whole. And it comes back out as something more harmonious. It comes back out as something that's more in tune with the whole. Because it's more in tune, because it's more harmonious, automatically it fits me better. Automatically it fits my life better. Automatically it sets me in a more pleasant direction, a less confrontational direction, a less, distorted direction. It's sort of like not knowing traffic rules. If you're driving along and you don't understand the traffic rules, right? Hey, all these cars are on this side and there's lots of cars, but if I look on this side of the road, there's no cars. I'll just drive over here, right? I'll drive on the left side where there's no cars. That makes sense, doesn't it? Well, you get lots of people shaking their fist at you and honking their horn, and eventually you'll get a few accidents, and life goes pretty rough. But then you start learning, which side of the road do I drive on? The little green arrow means I can turn now. Oh, okay. You start fitting these rules, and life goes a lot smoother. And that's exactly the way this idea of non-duality is. It's exactly the way this idea that we're functioning as a non-dual whole. To the extent that we fit that, to the extent that we move in tune with that, our life becomes smoother. Things become less painful. Okay. All right, let's take a look at the next page, on page 107. The very top paragraph. I'll go ahead and read. This is an interesting one, and it gives rise to the question of why is Daehaeng Sunim talking about this. So, Subhuti, does it seem to you that bodhisattvas take this great whole that is everything working as one and non-dually control and direct it? So it's like, wait a minute, what's she saying here? They take the whole and non-dually control and direct it? Why would somebody ask this? Well, I think this exact expression comes from people trying to understand Sunim's history and experiences. Because when she used to live in the Chiak Mountains, right? especially in the Chiak Mountains, and later when she moved, to a certain extent after she moved here to Anyang, people would come see her with problems, right? And they would say, oh, Sunim, I'm really hurting, I don't feel good. Or my wife is sick, or my child is sick, or sometimes my cow is sick, right? When I first heard people were coming to talk to her, to ask for help with their cows, I kind of had to laugh, because being a city boy, I didn't realize how important a cow was to a farmer out in Gangwon-do, out in Gangwon province. But that's like your entire tractor and your fertilizer and everything all together. And if you don't have your cow, you're not going to be eating in the winter. So cow is pretty important. But they would come up to her and they would say, I have this problem, and a lot of times they'd bring an offering or something, or sometimes they wouldn't, and she'd just say, okay, I understand. And they would be like, oh, great, she knows about the problem. And they'd leave, and whatever the problem was, it got better. Their cow got better, their wife got better, their child got better, their child figured out a way to get into school, the next level of school tests or whatever. It always got better. And so people would try to understand why did that happen? How did she do that? And if you come to me, if I go to you with a problem at work and I say, oh, there's a problem over here with this thing, then normally, okay, I'll go fix it, or I'll send somebody to go fix it, and it'll get taken care of, right? So it's like me acting on the problem, or me sending somebody to go fix the problem, and that's kind of the way stuff normally happens. But what she's saying with this verse is, it isn't me going and fixing the problem, right? There's no, you see this in Subhuti's answer, but what she's saying is, there's no me that goes and fixes a separate problem. There's just this non-dual whole. And so later, somebody asked her about this, and I don't know if it was in one of the books or maybe happened when we were going for a walk one day. And she said, people would bring this stuff to me, and when they told me about their suffering or their pain, at that instant, I hurt with them. That was my pain. That was my suffering. I was the cow that was sick when they said that. And I didn't want to be sick. I didn't want to hurt. So I just entrusted that problem and let it make this connection with this fundamental mind, or this whole. And the energy of the whole worked on that and changed it into something else. And then it went away. And so there was no me trying to fix your problem. It was just, there was a thing, it melted down, and it moved in tune with this non-dual whole, and it changed into something more harmonious. And that's all that happened. And so we see this several times in this translation of the Diamond Sutra. This idea that, no, there was nothing that I attained. There was nothing that I went and did. Because if I say, I picked up a pin, there's a pin, and there's me, and there's a separate action upon it, as we're three different things, right? And what she's saying is, no, there's not three different things. There's just, from the fundamental perspective, there's just this flowing one whole. From the subjective perspective or the relative perspective, you can say there is a pin, but this is a limited viewpoint, right? If I look at this pin is a unique combination of elements that exists at a certain point in time, right? I was going to say 100 years ago, but probably 5 years ago, none of this pin existed, right? It was probably, before it became a pin, it was probably ancient dinosaur from Saudi Arabia or someplace, right? And just oil. And then it got turned into a pin. And in a few years, it'll probably be recycled or burned up into something or changed into something else. So there's no permanent thing here for very long. For just less than an eye blink of the universe, there's this little blip of red in a different shape, and in just another instant, it'll be something else. And so, well, we can say there's a pin here, but we can't say, fundamentally, we shouldn't get caught up in the idea too hard that this is something completely separate. Because in a lot of Daehaeng Kunsinim's teachings, she talks about this prison that has no bars, right? The prison with bars made out of smoke, and that's our thoughts. If we say, I can't do it, then that becomes a real thing. Oh, I can't do this. If we say, this is like that, he's a good person, she's a bad person, and we raise up that thought, it starts trying to fix things into that shape, and it becomes very hard for them to shift out of that shape. What's more, even though it doesn't have to be that way, if I give rise to that thought and I hold on to it, I'm limiting myself. And I'm also, in a way, I'm also saying I'm the opposite of that, or that's something separate from me. I'm reinforcing the sense of duality. That's also why I think Kunsinim also warned people about blaming other people. Because if I say it's his fault that the electricity was off today, whatever it is, right? I'm saying there's something weird about that. Because mentally, when I say it's his fault or her fault, it becomes 100% their fault, right? It's 100% on them. Even though, for lots of ways I can think of how I contributed to that, right? Oh, through karma, through my choices, at a minimum, I chose, my decisions led me to being born in this era, right? At a minimum. So even if it's only like 1% or 2%, that was my choices that brought me here. And so if I say it's his fault, then I'm denying that 2%, or that, whatever percentage of it is. And the weird thing is, I'm also giving him all the power. It's his fault the government is the way it is. It's his fault the economy is the way it is. It's her fault the climate is the way it is. And when I say that, like I said, it's not this non-dual aspect. Now, all of a sudden, I've given her all of the power. All the power to change things is with her because it's her fault. If I said, it's my fault, I'm the one responsible, then all the power to change rests with me. And so instead of seeing, this may be a little bit of an example of skillful means because people are so used to looking outside themselves. But when Daehaeng Kunsinim said, see it as something you caused, that's a really different experience for people. Oh, it's my fault, or I'm the one who was responsible for being born into the family I was born into. If I didn't like my family situation, somehow my choices led me to that. And it may not have been a happy situation, but if my choices led me to that situation, then my choices can lead me out of that situation. So it's not trying to blame myself or beat up on myself or look down on myself, but it's acknowledging that my choices take me where I go. And if I want to go a different direction, then I can go a different direction. But it's up to me according to how I use my mind. So if I've never thought of things being this non-dual whole, it's hard to think of for the first time, right? But if I start thinking, okay, everything is a non-dual whole, I want to know this for myself. I want to really live this. I want to experience this. As I input these thoughts, then I begin to move in that direction. Then that perspective begins to open up. And so if we look on page 109, right, the last page of this chapter, I'll go ahead and read this. So, do not get caught up in intentions and thoughts that are skewed towards the material. Don't give rise to fixed views or opinions, for all things perceived through the five senses are fleeting and leave nothing behind. Instead, thoroughly entrust everything inwardly and function from one mind, free of all fixed views, free of ideas of having done something. So this is, now it's saying, don't get caught up in these limited views. Don't get caught up in these narrow aspects, because it, I need a pen. I have to write something. Okay, this is a pen. I go find it and I use it. That's fine. But if I start thinking, don't get caught up in it, doesn't mean don't have the thoughts, right? It doesn't mean don't use the thoughts. But if I think, this is the best pen ever, I must have this pen with me everywhere I go. Okay, I'm going to go shower. I'm going to go to the public bath. All right, take my pen with me. I have to have, people start thinking I'm crazy pretty quick. And it's the same thing with these fixed ideas, right? This is a pen, not a big deal, but he's a good person. She's a bad person. She's like this, he's like this, the government's like this, the economy is like that, the world is like that. Climate change is happening because of the billionaires, or it's happening because of these people. And, we think of the climate, the world, as something big that we can't do anything about. What can I do? Well, I can separate out my garbage, take out the little metal spring for my pen and throw it in one bag and throw the plastic in another bag. But, oh, well, that's what I can do. But that's not true, right? Because everything is one non-dual whole, truly, there's no big or small, right? If, the climate is big and my pen is small, okay, it's easy to think that way. But if everything is one non-dual whole, then that's not the case. There's no separate thing called climate. There's no separate thing called, ocean temperature. There's no separate thing called pen. They're all interconnected. So the thoughts I give rise to should affect all of them equally, right? The ocean temperature should be stable, right? The climate should be stable. If an earthquake is coming, or if the earth has to shift, let it shift in little small increments, right? So that nobody gets hurt. These thoughts are just as powerful as, where's my red pen, right? We think of, oh, this is small, and I want to go find my pen. Where's my pen? Oh, that's just whatever. But people shouldn't be hurt by earthquakes. If the climate has to change, let it change slow enough that people can adapt. If people need new sources of energy, let them find new sources of energy. We're capable of giving rise to these thoughts without limitation, right? Oh, I can't, earthquakes are too big. I can't affect whether an earthquake whether or not an earthquake happens. Not necessarily. I can give rise to the thought, okay, instead of a big shift that hurts a lot of people, just have a little small change. Instead of a volcano that just explodes and does a lot of damage, have it release a little bit of pressure slowly over a long period of time. Why can't I think that, right? that's just as easy a thought as anything else. But we tend to get caught up in, like I said, big or small, fixed or unfixed. You know, but that's not a necessary thing. And the very last verse on this chapter 10 is kind of a strange one, I'll be honest. To me, it's kind of out of the blue. And I'll go ahead and read it. Subhuti, what would you think if somebody's body was as big as the universe? Subhuti answered, that would be a very large body indeed, world-honored one. For this great body you are speaking of is the combined functioning and manifesting of our foundation, which is the entire universe. And so, like I said, even a little bit now I read this, it kind of hits me out of the blue. It's like, wait, what? Why are we talking about bodies? And I think it's this idea that you don't end at your fingertips, right? You don't end at the tips of your toes or the heels of your feet. You know, imagine your ending is not the shell, right? Your ending, your structure is as big as the universe, because none of that is separate from you. All that is a part of you. And I think that's the idea that they're trying to get across here. Okay, we'll go ahead and stop here for today, and next week we will pick up on chapter 11. So thank you very much.